It's the Hoffman Show. We are on the Team 980. We're also live on the free Odyssey app and streaming live on YouTube at the Team 980. Big thanks. You see Matt Essig in the chair today. Essig filling in last second for Ant. Ant's got a family situation that he's dealing with. My guy, if you're listening, sending you our absolute best. Wishing that everything turns out okay. So Ant is out today. Matt, really appreciate you sticking around. Metal Chris will be in for the latter 2/3 of the show, but Matt's staying around to give Chris a little time to get in here on short notice. So we're operating with what we got today, but with what we got, there's enough in this room, as some coach said at some point about something. It is a Vibe Check Tuesday, which means we need you in the room too. 301-230-0980, 301-230-0980. And Essig, I'm gonna start vibe checking with you as I want to do when you are here, because I definitely, of course, listen to you and Chris as I'm moseying around town when I can. But I did see that Chris had a lower draft grade than a lot of the experts. What was his gripe with the Commanders draft compared to the mean, if you will?
I think that the main issue with his draft was that he just isn't sure. He doesn't have the guarantees. There's a lot of players that have a lot of upside, but we're in a state that with this organization, this is a new coaching staff, new front of house, new everything, basically. We have a couple players coming back, but for the most part, this is an organization and a team that we have not seen, and we don't really have anything to go off of. So for the time being, the draft was great. But until we can actually say this player was good, this player was bad, Chris was just on the line of you can't have an A-graded draft if you don't know how the players are going to play.
Well, yeah. I mean, this is the silly part of our job, right?
Oh, yeah.
Is that we are expected. This is why I don't do like draft grades, etc. I can say I like this pick. I always this time of year try to give teams the benefit of the doubt, right? So unless you pull something, and like the counter example of this almost makes it easier, right? There is no, in my mind, justifying what Atlanta did taking Penix at 8, right? The reason you can't justify it is because it's a bad use of resources. Winning's really hard. You need to be all in to win. And using the number 8 pick on a backup plan is essentially hedging your bets, but all but guaranteeing that you're going to use it. Like, by not using the number 8 pick on a pass rusher or a corner or shoot, take Rome Odunze. I don't care. Do something that's going to help you win the Super Bowl with Kirk Cousins. Because if you're not trying to win the Super Bowl with Kirk Cousins, then why'd you pay him all that money? And if the answer is, well, we're not, we just want to be like competitive and who knows, then like don't sign Kirk Cousins. But the problem is so many NFL teams and franchises don't have the appetite to do the exact thing that Washington's trying to do, by the way, because their owner gets it. Josh Harris came out, it was like last July, I think it was. He went to this business and sports summit. I wish I could remember when it was, because then we go fishing in the folder and try to find the audio. But there ain't no shot that we're going to find this, Matt, unless for some reason you remember it because it was on your birthday or something. I don't know when your birthday is. Is your birthday in July?
No, it's in March.
Okay, I don't think it was in March because he didn't own the team yet.
Nah.
But Josh Harris said at this symposium, and Nikki Javala was there and reported on this, that it's really easy to go 8-8. Obviously, it's impossible to go 8-8 now because there's 17 games, 9-8. Although 9-9 is going to be back on the table soon, apparently. We'll talk about that later in the show. That they're looking at expanding to 18 games, but all of a sudden, it's like, hey, if you want to go 8-8, like I can get you there tomorrow. It ain't that hard. Go spend big on some free agents that aren't going to really help you win championships, but can help you get to kind of that middle of the pack. And what Atlanta, for instance, has done is like committed to being at least that good. But when you use the number 8 pick on a future backup succession plan, like you've wasted a resource to be good right now. And so outside of moves like that, where the roster building strategy isn't sound, I tend to give teams the benefit of the doubt this time of year. Where, like, yeah, there's certain picks that I like way more than most. There's certain things that I'm like, yeah, that was really smart. Certain organizations where, like, they pick the guy that you're just like, oh, of course they got that guy. But I thought, God, who made this point earlier today? Someone made a point on one of the 8 million sports television shows, like one of the 5 big ones, though, that are the national shows. It was on McAfee or Get Up or something like that. But there was like everyone just gives Howie Roseman a pat on the back every year. It's like, oh, the Eagles won the draft because Howie Roseman, his draft picks mimic the draft board of like the media draft boards more than anyone else. Does that mean that the media draft boards are right? I don't know. I think the Detroit Lions draft board with Jahmyr Gibbs really high and Jack Campbell really high seems to be pretty good. Like Brad Holmes does a lot of stuff that's off the board, the media draft board, but sure as bleep works for the Detroit Lions last couple years. By the way, their assistant GM the last couple years is now one of their top execs is now the Commander's assistant GM. Feels relevant. But at the end of the day, like I wouldn't term it as the way Chris did, maybe that, or at least that he did on Twitter, that, oh, my draft grade's a little lower than everybody. But like admitting that we have no idea this time around is 100% valid. I'm actually looking at a graphic right now on NFL Network. A divisional quarterback or divisional round quarterbacks of the 8 last year, all of them but Purdy were first-round picks. But that doesn't mean that, okay, well, then if you drafted a first-round quarterback, unfortunately it doesn't mean this for Washington, that you're automatically, like, in 3 years going to be in the divisional round. Look at the class of 2021. All of them stink. Every single one of them. Outside of Trevor Lawrence, who, even though he was seen as a generational prospect, has been kind of disappointing. But, like, that's the silly part of this time of year. And sure, does that mean are we not going to take calls all of a sudden and just we're going to throw up our hands all together and say, oh, we don't know, so how could we possibly? Which is like we had fun with a caller late in the show yesterday who didn't like the Commanders draft. And, you know, I poked some holes in some of his arguments because, like, he seemed to not really understand who Ben Sinnott was as a player, or Ben Sinnott, I beg your pardon, as a player because, you know, he's like, oh, he doesn't block. I'm like, congrats on not watching the guy. But scouting is so subjective. Scouting is not only is it subjective going in, it's also objective on the back end based off factors that are hard to assess, right? Did you miss something in the scouting process, or did it just not work out, or would that same player have worked out somewhere else and you failed as an organization? Like, that's one of the things that I think I'm so excited about for the Commanders is it seems like they have plans for a lot of these guys, and they also are committing the resources to make themselves right. Like the nutritionists and the equipment that's needed to be top tier in the classroom, if you will, the meeting rooms. Like those kind of investments, these multi-million-dollar investments we're hearing about in both human and infrastructural resources are the kinds of things that make draft picks work out. And so, like, you know, later in the show, we might do some winners and losers of the draft as a whole. We did some the other day just on the first round. I think we did that on Friday. We'll take a look at the bigger ones and, like, you know, look at a team like Arizona. Like, they're going to be a winner because they had 12 draft picks. And so the way they won the draft is they didn't have to be, you know, precise and accurate with who they chose. They just took a shotgun approach. If they have 12 picks and 6 of them hit, that's still 6 hits. That's a great draft. Your percentage isn't great, but if we all say beforehand the best way to nail a draft is to have a bunch of picks, and you have a bunch of picks, good job, Monty Ossenfort. Working the phones. But I that's interesting to hear, Matt, because I do think that it points out the silliness of what we do this time of year. We're removing the fourth wall. We are, whatever phrase you want to use there, we are just going like, yeah, here's what we think, but can we acknowledge at the very least that none of us really know? And by the way, neither do the teams.
Can I just say, at least from my vibe check, previous years, previous drafts, it has felt like it was people that I knew, I was aware of, all that kind of stuff, and active was like, oh, you know what? These are the people that beforehand they were talking about wanting to draft. So coming out, it's like I knew who we were going to get, and I came out with a level of excitement because I knew everything about all the players. And at the same time, there was apprehension because we historically didn't do great on the draft. This
No.
year, I'll be honest, a lot of the players just flat out, I needed to look up a lot more information as soon as we were drafted. And when I found out, oh, this is a player that I would have absolutely overlooked, I'm now looking at this roster and I'm saying, you know what? I do not know what exactly they're going to play. I don't know how this is going to turn out, but I have optimism that, you know what, this organization seems to actually know what they're doing and they're getting the players that need to be gotten.
And in San Francisco, like, I don't think anyone was like, oh, yeah, that Kittle tight end in the 5th round. Like, what a steal of a pick. Dude's going to go to the Hall of Fame. Like, that's the point. We don't know. So, like, people are like, oh, they could have done something else at tackle. They could have done something else at tight end. It's like, I'm going to just kind of trust Adam Peters here that he knows what he's looking for, that Dan Quinn and Cliff and the position coaches gave them an idea of like, hey, we want this archetype of a player. Can you go find the best one? And Adam's real good at that. But what do you think? Anyway, hey, none of us know, but what do you think? Great setup for Vibe Check Tuesday, Craig. Good professional hosting job. 301-230-0980. It doesn't mean we can't have feelings. That's never stopped us from having feelings before. 301-230-0980. We already got some folks calling in. We'll get to the calls as soon as we are back from the break, but plenty of open phone lines. Hit us up on a Vibe Check Tuesday here on The Hoffman Show. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app and streaming live on YouTube at the Team 980. It's a vibe check Tuesday on the phones at 301-230-0980. How do you feel about the Commanders draft with, 48 hours, whatever number of hours it's been, something more than 48. I don't know. It ended Saturday night. That plus the number of hours we are till right now. To digest it all, you've been able to read some analysis. You've heard some great guests on our station. You heard me talk about it. By the way, you'll hear Logan's take on why he thinks Brandon Coleman is a tackle, the TCU third-round pick, coming up at 5 p.m. But all of that still to come. Right now, your calls at 301-230-0980. And let's start with Russ in Tampa. Russ, thanks for calling. You are on the Hoffman Show.
What's going on, Craig? You call me Russ or Ross?
Russ is what I have written down. If it's supposed to say Ross, then I can, we're just going to give Essig's already had a full shift, so.
It's all good, man. Hey,
well, which one is it? So we know.
Think of Rick Ross, but less financially stable.
Okay. Well, I don't know. He's had an odd couple of weeks. Anyway, Ross, got it. All good. All right, Ross, hit us.
Okay, so in recent years, the best sports moment ever I've seen was Dan Snyder selling the team behind Georgia Bulldogs beating Alabama for the national championship. This is the best time to be a fan, but there's just so many fans out there who just look for reasons to be miserable. Like, I don't remember who it was who called last week after I talked to you. He's talking about, I don't know about Jaden Daniels because he's not a good speaker. Like, come on, man. Seriously? After all the stuff this franchise has been through, whether it was the name change, the losing, Dan Snyder, the people want to back down now. Like, I told the producer, somebody wants to bail on the team because they drafted a defensive tackle. And I told him, this is a new day and age, man. Best player available. That's how we need to do it moving forward, man. I'm super excited. I haven't been this excited in a long time, man. And, I might mess around and fly up to Virginia just so I can watch them train for training camp.
Wow, the training camp trip. Now that's how we know, Ross, the enthusiasm's great. Ross, appreciate the call. As always, man. Ross, listening on the free Odyssey app. You can call us as well, 301-230-0980. I think that the best player available, part of this is also really important because of where they are in the rebuild. Of course they're taking best player available, which should have been the most duh thing ever, but I think we all got so... and look, I certainly was part of this. This is a we thing, not a me chastising the fans thing. I try not to do that anyway, but occasionally it's like, hey, let's settle down here. But I think we all looked at tackle and are just like, they've got to. I mean, Logan and I talked Thursday night. Technically, it was Friday morning. It was 12:15 in the morning after the first round. And we're doing our second round preview, and I was like, what do you do at 36? Here's the guys available. Here's some of the guys that I really like. If one of them falls, you just take them. And he's like, I think you take the best tackle available at 36, and then you see what you got at 40. Logan's not some overreactive fan. He's the most analytical, down-to-earth, not caring about the narrative person that I've ever met. And Adam Peters was like, we got a plan. By the way, also, we're not passing on Jerzon Newton. I've seen some people say they had him as the best defensive player in the draft and top 15 type of pick. I don't think that I'd have him that high. There's other folks that maybe would. But clearly he was the best player on the board at that point. And so you take him. And when you get to 40, there was clearly a range of players that they liked. They were comfortable with multiple of them. DeJean, for whatever reason, didn't fit from either a schematic or a character or maybe their medical team wasn't satisfied with the injury history, whatever reason. And I know it's intra-division, which rubs some people the wrong way, but at the end of the day, they got 50 and 53 for 40? That's a hell of a trade, even if it costs you some pick swap stuff later. But I think that the other thing that clearly the Commanders had a really great feel for is the contour of this draft. This was a draft that you wanted as many picks as possible in the top 100. You didn't want a bunch of, like some drafts, like you want to take a bunch of flyers in the 5th, 6th round. The talent in this draft, by most people's estimation, dropped off somewhere around 100. Which also, I think, gets to like the Luke McCaffrey pick. Because there's some people that are like, oh, well, Luke McCaffrey, maybe that was a reach. Maybe they could have gotten him later. One, they didn't have a 4th rounder. So the idea, could they have potentially traded back up, but they had used most of their picks at that point. I guess they could have tried to trade back, but you need a trade partner. Most people, like, honestly, it's the last pick of the day. They probably shut it down for the night. You know, they're going to doing their press conferences, like, you know, so-and-so's on the phone. He's like, hey, sorry, I'm answering questions at the press conference. No, I don't want to trade up. So you get stuck there. And with the type of receiver that they want, mixed with the type of character that they want, Luke McCaffrey might have been the last guy on their board in that situation. It might have been the type of thing where you look at some of the other players that are like the power slot, bigger bodies, but slot receivers, and when you watch the tape of them, you're like, I don't know that his compete level is high enough. That's not a commander. That's not who we want. We need to get a wide receiver. It's a little rich, but like, let's go for it. And I think that's the kind of thing that you start to understand about how the Commanders did this. And again, taking your calls, 301-230-0980, 301-230-0980 on a Vibe Check Tuesday. But I think even though we're not going to know ultimately if they nailed the picks until years from now, the reason my vibe is very good, the reason my vibe is high, is because they seem to have, unlike in other years, a clear idea of what they wanted. They wanted guys with athletic upside who have an upward trajectory, who compete their ass off. And that seems like something that everyone would want, but how concretely do you stick to that? And, you know, there's no wiggle room between what their stated goals were and their execution. There was no exception for this guy's got some concerns. He doesn't compete every snap, or there's this thing that he did that if you do your homework, you find out about, or he can't be trusted with his nutrition or whatever. He doesn't study, like whatever the quote-unquote character concerns, or just like, hey, he's a great kid, but he's going to take some plays off. That happens a lot. And there's nothing wrong with the human being. It's just they get tired, their conditioning's not up, or they just don't have that kind of motor, like the really truly special motor. And the Commanders targeted guys that did. That limits who you can take, and they nailed their type of guy. And because, to get back to Ross's point of best player available, because the cupboard was so bare, because they got here and looked around and went, we got a lot of replacing to do. Just because there are guys here doesn't mean they fit that. And so over the course of the next 3 years, they're trying to reset 90+% of this roster probably. I mean, they've done like half of it already. But even if they've got some contractual obligations that are going to keep guys here for the first couple of years, you don't go like, oh, well, we have this position set, so we're going to pass on Jerzon Newton. Well, what happens next year when you want to move on from John Allen? You got to go find a defensive tackle, unless you already took Jerzon Newton. So you don't pass on Jerzon Newton. And that philosophy winds up being proven correct time and time again across the league. The league is too unpredictable to go back, sorry to just keep on murdering the Falcons, but to be worried about contingency plans and backup plans. Do what you need right now. And sometimes that involves some long-term planning. But at the end of the day, like, that's why I like what the Commanders did so much, is they're like, this is our goal. We're building the foundation. We want this type of guy. And they did not budge off of that strategy. The Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app. We got full open phone lines. So on a Vibe Check Tuesday, where you at? Where you at? It's 4:30 typically. Y'all pick up a little bit on the phones. Certainly hoping that's the case today. 301-230-0980. Talking NFL draft with you next. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app. And we have questions about what's going on down the hall. Essig's answering the phones right now. I will try to do this on my own. Russell's down there in the producer's studio for Grant and Danny after obviously finishing his show here. And it looked like Grant was trying to jump on his back. And that's not the first time I feel like I've seen Grant jumping on somebody down there. It just feels like a lot of people are at risk for Paulson to just jump on their back today. I don't know what's going on.
I got to be honest, that scares me. Chris Russell, as is a little bit of a walking time bomb. Let's not have people walk on his back also.
Yeah, what happened with his finger yesterday?
He did something to it over the weekend that he came in and it was very inflamed and puffy.
Is it better today?
It looked a little bit better today. He spent the last couple days during the show just keeping it in soapy water. So
yeah, because that's clearly what is the correct thing to do. The soap cleans it out or something.
We're not doctors on our show.
We're not on this show either. But yeah, I don't even have a butt. I just neither are we.
It's wild times at Odyssey DC. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah. The Team 980, an Odyssey sports station. It's what the branding folks dreamed of. Let's go to the phones. 301-230-0980, 301-230-0980. Vibe Check Tuesday. Now we got some folks on the lines. We do have a couple more open if you want to get in. But let's start off with Devin in Rockville. Devin, thanks for calling. You are getting us started here on the Hoffman Show.
What's up, Craig, man? You know me, man. You know I'm a lifelong listener. I started listening back when Anthony first started, and he was producing the B. Mitch and Doc Walker show. So I've been around. I listened to you. Remember I told you I called? I really didn't like you at first, but then I'm like, this guy is really intelligent. Like, he really is good with his craft, and I've been hooked ever since. I listen to you every day.
Appreciate that, Devin. Appreciate that.
Yeah, man. I love our draft. Like you said, like I said, man, you're very intelligent. I love your craft. You hit it on the nail. We're getting all the guys that fit the character of the coaching staff, which it seems so new to us, but that's what teams do. That's why Rosie Housen and why he does so great over there in Philly, because they just go get the guys that fit their program. So right now, it's just we're behind the eight ball. So now we're seeing the culture and the type of players that they're trying to get. And like I just told your producer, my favorite pick, of course, after Jalen, is the D tackle because, man, like I say, all I do is listen to the local media radio all day, every day, from 6 in the morning to the time I get up till you get off at 7. So I used to hear John Allen every Monday on the Junkie. He used to irritate me, man. Like, he says the right thing, but then when you go out there on Sunday, I don't never really see him. Just last year, I know he's been great for us, but he wasn't really, like, game-changing there. He wasn't making those spectacular plays, and it was just like, okay, and then you're expressing, like, yeah, I do think I do have to be honest, and I do think about, I want to win, so if it's not here, it's somewhere. So it's kind of like, you don't think that they heard that too, so it's like, we potentially got to the replacement because owe you no more money.
Yeah, Devin. No, I appreciate the call, and I also really appreciate the kind words and you checking in. Thank you. But I said this, earlier in the week, and I'll repeat it here because I think it's worth repeating. I also think, like, you hear that from John, and you can take it one of a couple ways. You can be like, yeah, this dude ain't long for here, and, like, this ain't our kind of dude, but we owe him a lot of money right now, and we don't want to change too much too soon, and we know he's good, so, like, let's see what happens. You can kind of take that and then, like, draft his replacement and be like, okay, well, in a year from now. But I also think you could read that comment the way that I honestly would read it, like, no, I'm not boys with John Allen by any stretch of the imagination. But, like, I've covered John's entire career. I covered him as a reporter. At the end of my time as a reporter, I've covered him now as a host and as whatever, roles I've had at the stations since I left the beat at the end of the 19 season. Like, I know John Allen's football character pretty well, and that dude is a competitor. And that dude is someone who really wants to win. And that dude is someone who got worn down by the fact that he had to do a lot and was getting very little in return. And so if I am Adam Peters, the way I look at Jerzon Newton in relation to John Allen is this is a guy that's going to light a fire under him and also allow him to do the things that he is capable of doing because he is not going to have to play 85% of snaps. Like, the biggest problem for John Allen in the last 2 years has been, like, health and consistency. And he hasn't had the pieces next to him operating at a high level, and he's had to play way too much football. And so if you can back his snaps down from 90%, 85% or 80% to 65, 70%, but in those 70% of snaps, he's way fresher and thus way more effective. He is also now surrounded by a bunch of dudes who care on the level that he cares. And because eventually, like, if you care as much as John cares, and this is admittedly the most gracious, the most benevolent, the most, like, positive look at how reading John's situation. I'll admit that. But, like, at some point, if you care as much as he cares and you're surrounded by a bunch of people that don't and you're just losing a bunch, you have to turn your care off. Otherwise, you're going to drive yourself insane. Like, it's self-preservation at that point. And so now John goes to work and he's surrounded by not dudes goofing off in the way that some of the dudes that left here goofed off, but he's surrounded by Bobby Wagner. He's surrounded by Dan Quinn, who, like, loves it and lives and breathes it. And they're surrounded by a toughness and a football character and a competitive character that seems reminiscent of the thing that he knows works. You're going to get way more out of John Allen. So physically, mentally, spiritually, emotionally, and even motivationally. If you want to say like, hey, John, you better get it together. Otherwise, this dude's going to replace you next year. Sure, light a fire under his ass. Bring out the competitor in him. Let's see what it does. I'm excited for John Allen because of Jerzon Newton, not excited for Jerzon Newton because I think he's going to replace John Allen, if that makes sense. Obviously, very excited for both. Let's go to Paul in D.C. Paul, thanks for calling. You are on the Hoffman Show.
Yes, thanks for taking my call. But I think you nailed that right on with as far as the draft is concerned. But I want to say this also is that can you believe with the way that their draft board may have been looking with all this anticipation from all the experts and fans and talk show hosts that they went the direction that the Commanders wanted to go in. And I want to say this too also, Craig, is that I know we talk about Peters and we talk about Quinn, but just think about those assistant coaches that they got. Just about every last one of them has been in charge of some type of department, so they know what they're looking for, man. They really know what they're looking for. Tell me what you think about that, man. Have a good day now.
Yeah, no, thanks, Paul. It's a good question and good call. I think that's dead on. I think that like what makes a good relationship between a coach and a GM is exactly what Paul just hit on. If I'm a coach, can I articulate truly what I want? And then as a GM or an assistant GM or a college scout, as an evaluator, can I actually hit what the coach asked for? Do I understand if a coach tells me I need a dude that can do X? I understand as the evaluator what traits both physically and humanly, character-wise, are necessary. Because I'm trying to think of like examples, and these might not be dead on because I'm doing this on the fly here, right? These calls are people that call in. We don't have plants. We just have people call in, and I react to them live on the air. That's how talk radio works, right? So if I need a guy with pass rush juice, and I am told by my defensive coordinator or my D-line coach or my pass rush specialist, hey, I don't need an every down player. I need a dude who's got the moves on third down to come in on third and long and get pressure on the quarterback. It's not that I don't care about his character or his football character as much, but I care way less than an offensive lineman who I need to rely on every snap. If I want a lineman, this is, by the way, I think the biggest reason why they shift away from Patrick Paul and Kingsley Suamatia and all these dudes in favor of Brandon Coleman. Coleman competes his you-know-what's off every single snap. Been learning more about the kid since they drafted him on Friday. And, like, part of the reason that his PFF grade was down last year is because he played through a ton of injuries. And he just figured out how to get the job done. And it wasn't pretty, and it wasn't at times even that good, but he figured out how to be out there, and he figured out how to get it done. And in an offensive lineman, I care about that a lot. Because reliability of an offensive lineman, that I understand what I'm going to get. Even if he comes to me and says, Coach, I don't got it all today. I might need a little extra help, but I'm going to be out there. Like, I can plan for the known. And I think that's what you get from a character standpoint in a guy like Coleman. And so if I'm Bobby Johnson and Cliff Kingsbury and Anthony Lynn as the O-line coach, OC, and run game coordinator, and I go to Adam Peters and his staff and I say, I need someone who I can rely upon. I want someone who's a great athlete. I want someone with heavy hands. Do they spit out Brandon Coleman and they go, hey, this is your guy. We're pretty sure we can get him in like the third round. Or here's our grade on him. You tier up your board, and when he's the best player available, you take him. Versus they didn't take anybody like this year, but like you got a pass rush specialist who, like a guy like Andre Jones maybe is like this. I think Jones played pretty hard in college, but like he's got some severe limitations, but he's also got this upside that you're like, I want to find out. And I care about that less on a specialist pass rusher than I do on an offensive lineman, for instance. I care about the study habits of a quarterback more than I do a running back. Not that running backs don't have to study, but at the end of the day, if I put the ball in the guy's hands and he figures it out, like, great. There is no figuring it out without the studying when it comes to quarterback. The most prepared ones win. And the ones who understand how to prepare win. And so those are the kinds of things that I think we're talking about in terms of, can the coach articulate to the general manager and his staff, the front office, the evaluators, exactly what he wants? And then can the evaluators in the front office go and find it? And I think that's a great point and a great question by Paul. And to me, that's the answer is that, and I guess the real answer is like when they've got guys who have been coordinators and have coached up a position to where they are now, they've had to do that even more. And Adam Peters is widely considered one of the best of that in the NFL, which is why he and Kyle Shanahan got along so well and were so successful in plugging exact pieces into the offense out in San Francisco. Never mentioned the number of defensive coordinators that he worked with in San Fran, and obviously was able to fill up a bunch of great positions and a bunch of great players there as well. When we get back here on the Team 980, more of your phone calls on a Vibe Check Tuesday. Did the Commanders address tackle after all? Logan's take on Brandon Coleman, the TCU offensive lineman, coming up in a special Take Command on the radio edition at 5 o'clock. 5:30 today, we check in with an LSU insider, get their take on Jaden Daniels, the Commanders quarterback of the future and, frankly, the present. Right now, though, more from you on a Vibe Check Tuesday. 301-230-0980 is the phone number, 301-230-0980. Let's keep things rolling with our guy Mike in Fort Washington. Mike, thanks for calling. You are on the Hoffman Show.
Craig, thank you for taking my call, my friend.
You got it. What's up?
Can you hear me? Oh, okay, good. So listen, I agree wholeheartedly with your take on the Jonathan Allen situation. I think what we've been hearing for a year and a half from him is just utter frustration. I think he was frustrated. He came from a situation where he won all the time and then was thrust into a situation where they lost all the time. So I agree wholeheartedly with you. What I need a little more clarification from you just help me to understand like the difference between the Commanders drafting the defensive tackle, and I can't remember his name at the moment, but the defensive tackle as opposed to the Falcons bringing in Michael Penix.
Yeah.
Like I don't understand like the juxtaposition because in one sense we say that hey that's a good idea, that's smart drafting, he's not going to be here forever, but then on the other hand, on the flip side, it's not a very good idea for the Falcons to have brought Penix in with Cousins because I totally think that Cousins got paid $100 million like guaranteed, and I don't really think or see. I don't really understand the rationale behind like they can't do that because what happens is no one can say, oh, you can't draft this person, you can't do this person, and it doesn't necessarily mean they're not committed to Cousins.
Well, Mike, it's actually really simple. Like, it really like it's a valid question. I'm glad you asked it, but the answer is as simple as this: one's quarterback and one's not. Quarterback is the only position on the field where there's one, right? Jer'Zhan Newton is, even if he's a backup this year, even if he's a backup the next 3 years, is still going to play 45 to 60% of the snaps in a rotation. So you're going to get value from him no matter what. If Michael Penix plays for Atlanta, that means something's gone wrong, right? There was a great saying from, I meant to double check which former Colts assistant it was. It might have been Howard Mudd. It might have been Tom Moore, who I think was like, he was their OC. Then he was just kind of a special assistant. Anyway, he was asked, one of their coaches during the Peyton Manning years was asked, like, hey, well, why don't you ever give Jim Sorgi, the backup, reps, right? Sorgi, longtime backup, never played, nevertheless practiced for the Colts. And the assistant coach goes, if Sorgi plays, we're bleeped, and we don't practice bleeped. And as simple as it is, that's the answer to the question, right? And I just think it's so hard to win in the NFL that if you commit in the way the Falcons did to Cousins, you owe it to yourselves, nevertheless to him, you owe it to yourselves to use every resource to say, we're going to maximize our chances of success. Because I think sometimes in life it's really smart to play for a plan B and like be prepared in case something goes wrong. But other times when you plan for plan B, you wind up shortcutting plan A and you almost guarantee yourself going to plan B. And then you're like, oh, look how smart we are. But the thing is, if plan B was the best plan.
You didn't want to be that smart initially.
Right. If plan B was the best plan, that would have been plan A.
This should have been plan A. I get it. I understand. I really just think they kind of had an old bleep moment. You know what I mean? I'm not so sure that the Falcons thought that he would be there at the time and that they drafted.
Maybe.
And they were like, wow, what do we do? You know what I'm saying? And hey, look, maybe, that's why I think they called Cousins before they did and said, hey, man, listen, this is what we're thinking about doing. So I kind of think it all kind of fell into their lap. I don't know. I won't necessarily say that it was their plan, but I do think that it was prudent. I personally, I think it was a prudent move. I have nothing against either one. I'm a Commanders fan. I have a Commanders season tickets. I have no horse in that race. All I'm just saying is I think that they've been taking a little bit of heat, a little more heat than maybe.
Yeah, I just think my whole thing is if you want Penix, I got no problem with it. He wouldn't be a guy that I would take at 8. But if you're going to take Penix at 8, then don't go spend $130 million on Cousins, because that's now $130 million or $100 million, whatever, whichever number you want to use, that you can't spend on your rookie quarterback. Because that's the other side of it, Mike, is the whole benefit of having a rookie quarterback is you get to be on this rookie quarterback timeline where the guy's growing into his own, but you have a ton of money to surround him with other players. Now you've done both, or you've done neither. You neither have used the cheap resources on players to support your veteran expensive quarterback, nor do you have the money to support your rookie quarterback. So you've wound up with the worst version of both somehow.
I got you. It makes sense. You know, I mean, we can agree to disagree, and it's fine.
Totally.
You know what I mean? That's what all this is. You know,
100%.
your opinion, my opinion, and there it is. Thanks for taking my call, man.
You got it, Mike. Call back anytime. Appreciate that, Mike. Let's go to another Mike. This one's in Baltimore. Mike, thanks for holding. Thanks for calling. You're on the Hoffman Show.
Hey, Craig. Thanks for taking my call.
You got it.
I'm an old guy that lived through the great experience of Bobby Beathard and Gibbs. And the biggest difference with this new organization is the level of coaches that we have. For Ken Norton, only thing he has to do is coach the linebackers. We've never had that in the past couple of regimes. And the offense, you've got Kingsbury, you've got Lynn, and to tell me that they can't take the talent that we have and coach them up, it's going to be night and day. And for the talent of the coaches and the assistant coaches to make adjustments at halftime, you have such great knowledge there that I think it's going to make all the difference in the world.
Yeah, no, Mike, I totally agree. I think one of the things that made the last couple of years really difficult as an analyst is I look at players and I don't have any idea if they're good. I have no idea if Benjamin St. Juste is a good NFL football player. I know he's played poorly, but he also played really well 2 years ago. Emmanuel Forbes showed me some stuff this year. He also showed me some bad stuff this year. Like, show me some good stuff, show me some bad stuff. Which one is he? I don't know. A guy like Quan Martin got way, way better as he got more experience. Was he coached better as the year went? They simplified his role. Like, what would have happened if he had less to worry about moving forward? Like, there's just so much that goes into being a successful NFL player, from your situations to the kind of coaching you get to how you're deployed. Does the role that you're asked to do match the skill set? And coaching is an enormous part of that. And, as I've said before, I think my big question for this coaching staff is not the talent that's on it. It's the ability for them to be cohesive, right? You have Anthony Lynn, who's actually worked for a ton of different coaches and has a wide variety of backgrounds. You have Cliff, who is classically trained in the air raid, if you will, played for Mike Leach, the whole deal, but has been evolving his offense over the course of really like 10 years through college and then ultimately into the NFL. And especially when he was in Arizona, like, that offense evolved and became more pro style and implemented more West Coast and used some heavier personnel and got away from some of the things that are based to the air raid, that 10 personnel, 4 wide receiver type of stuff. And so how do they mesh all of that knowledge into something that maximizes Jaden Daniels' strengths, minimizes his weaknesses, accounts for the strengths and weaknesses of the other units, receivers, line, running backs, etc., puts the right amount on Jaden Daniels' plate that he can thrive as a rookie while also continuing to learn, that there's not too much, but also that you don't underutilize him, right? If you just have him hand the ball off every play, like, whatever, it's a waste of his talent. There's got to be stuff that you say, like, hey, you're good at this. We're going to try to give you a couple of opportunities per game to use your deep ball accuracy, to throw the deep comeback with some anticipation, to do whatever it is that they think he can do, or even just like spread the field, go 4 verts, see what happens, and then tell him, like, hey, dude, pick your matchup. If he doesn't win, like, go run. We're going to give you space. We're pretty sure they're going to play man here. Their backs are going to be turned. Go steal 15, 20 yards. And if a safety stops looking too, then and you can outrun him, like, go run 80. Like, those are the kinds of things that you're trying to do as an offensive coordinator. And I think it just felt like certainly last year with Bieniemy on offense, nevertheless, the disaster that was on defense. But on offense, they just didn't speak to any of that. They're just like, we're going to go out and prove what we do. And it's like, do we do that? And the answer was definitively no. So I totally agree. The caliber of coaching and the general approach to football is going to be very different. And I do think that like Dan Quinn has a big role to play in this as well. To wrap up the thoughts for the hour here, like Dan is a defensive coach. Dan is a guy that understands the power of possession. And I think Ron just got so hands off, because he does too, but he got so hands off and I think got so burnt with the Riverboat Ron stuff. And like Ron just like, I think lost himself in a lot of ways at coaching here. He was focused on other stuff and just couldn't really handle it. And we don't need to relitigate all of that, but needless to say, the focus, the intent is just night and day different than what it has been. And unlike last year where I was really optimistic this time of year about Bieniemy, like there's a lot more substance to sit on, I think, this year than some of the sizzle and anticipation of last season. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app. And when we get back, did the Commanders actually address tackle, even though everyone initially thought that they didn't? Why Logan is high on Brandon Coleman as a possible solution as soon as this year at left tackle for the Commanders. Next, let's take command on a Tuesday here on the Team 980. It's the Hoffman Show. We're live on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app, streaming live on YouTube at the Team 980. In about 60 seconds, you'll hear Logan Paulson on Brandon Coleman, the 78th pick in the draft, and the hopeful left tackle of the future. Why Logan is hopeful of that, despite everyone thinking initially the Commanders didn't even address tackle in this draft. But real quick, Essek, I got to tell you what just happened in the break. I was scrolling Instagram in the break, and which I do not just to kill time, but because I'm always on the hunt for things for the end of the show, for real things. And I found this amazing clip of Liverpool coach Jurgen Klopp and Brian Callahan, the new head coach of the Titans, who quoted Klopp in his introductory press conference, like exchanging videos. And I want to pull it for the end of the show. And so I told Siri to set a reminder for 3 minutes. Once we get into Not My Beat here, you get into the take command bit. So once we hit play on that, so I can go and record this soundbite for the end of the show. So I did that via Siri, like a voice reminder. And guess which of the two coaches it spelled correctly? It got Jurgen Klopp in German with the accents.
For real?
Didn't spell Callahan correctly.
That's what I got to know. What did it spell?
It said Callahan. Maybe it's the way I said it. Maybe it's my fault. Maybe it's an operator error, but it's like Callahan.
So I will say I'm pretty sure that is actually the traditional quote unquote
Irish.
Yeah.
Oh, it's Brian Callahan.
But I mean, let's be honest. They don't know how to spell anything over there. Just look at how you spell Neve.
No, they're all drunk.
Too much
Anyway.
Guinness.
Yeah. It's time for Not My Beat.
Today's top story from the perspective of someone who's there.
You are looking live.
This just in.
Not My Beat.
All right, today's Not My Beat, a home game, if you will. Logan Paulson and I talking about the Commanders' third-round picks on Take Command. If you want our thoughts on the second-round picks, Take Command, well, it's in your podcast feed right now. And if you want fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh round picks. Well, there were no fourths, but fifth, sixth, sevenths, and the undrafted free agents. Well, we haven't recorded that podcast yet, but that's why you subscribe to Take Command. But third rounders, we got that for you right now. Logan, they didn't address tackle, or did they? That is the question with Brandon Coleman, the offensive lineman out of TCU. And reading his scouting report is so interesting to me because most of the time when you look at guys who played some tackle, played some guard, it's like, he's not athletic enough, his arms aren't long enough. Like, there's obvious reasons why people project these guys inside to play guard. Brandon Coleman, athlete, pretty physically gifted, and he just happened to play a lot of guard, and maybe he struggled in space. Like, you can tell me based off the tape why you think he maybe bounced inside outside and where you would project him. But I think the idea that they didn't address tackle, people might be speaking too soon here because, when they put out the Instagram post, whatever it's worth, it said Brandon Coleman, offensive tackle, 67.
Yeah, and like you said, this guy was a really interesting evaluation because he's like a wide-hipped, kind of wide-backed. Like when you see him, he screams guard. He wears like a big neck brace cowboy collar thing. He doesn't really, because he's got this thing on. He plays
neck roll.
Yeah, he plays his face off, right? He's physical, he's got heavy hands, all this stuff. So you're like, dude's gonna be a great guard, right? And then when he was drafted, they were like, oh, he's a tackle. Like they were very specific. He's a tackle. He's a tackle. He's a tackle. I was like, well, I'm gonna go back and watch all his tackle reps. And so I watched the game. I think it was not the national championship game, but the semifinal game from 2022 where he's playing against Michigan. And again, really good athlete. In space is like, I thought it was going to struggle, but he has a really good feel for the pass protection line, right? And so one of the things about having a good feel for that is like he can angle set at a really nice level because he's pretty quick, right? I don't know if he's got the hip flexibility to do like a straight vertical set, but really good feel for the line, heavy hands, and uses his arm length really well. And his feet are pretty good. So when I was watching him, I was like, man, this guy kind of reminds me of like DJ Humphries a little bit. He's not like the tallest guy in the world. He's not like he doesn't look like a traditional tackle necessarily, but like he has the length and the foot speed to get it done. So again, really interesting eval. He played guard at the Senior Bowl. I actually thought he had better reps at tackle, honestly, when I watched him play. Like, he just looked more comfortable there. And again, going back and watching his tackle stuff, I was like, maybe. Like, to me, he screams Sam Cosmi to me. Like, when I watched him, like, he can play tackle, but is going to be a better guard. But because of the length that he's got, Cosmi's got 33 and an eighth inch arms, so a little shorter arms. Because of the length, it makes you think, well, maybe he can survive there. In addition to how he pass sets, he's got this great thick lower half, and he can sit on some of the power rushes. And because he's got such heavy hands, he can disrupt rushers well. And then once they're disrupted, even though he's in a bad spot, he can kick back and recover at a high level. So I'm really, again, I think great football character, plays the game you want to play it. In terms of role, I don't hate the tackle thing now. Like, I think you definitely got to see how it looks and see how it plays. But the athlete, I don't know how I missed it, because I went to the combine. I didn't even know that he ran that fast. I didn't know that he jumped that high. I didn't know that he was measured that long. And then you couple that with the interview process, you say, well, shoot, maybe he's got something here. So obviously you got to see how he looks against, NFL pass rushers. But I think he checks a lot of boxes. And people say, oh, what about, Braden Daniels? He's a good athlete. This is a different type of athlete. Like, when you watched Coleman, the pass protecting feel of not oversetting. So, like, not getting my hat past the midline of the rusher is right there. The timing of the punch is right there. Does it look always like let's say like Trent Williams? No, it doesn't. But it's functional. And that's something you should never sleep on with pass protection. Is if it's functional, there's a really good reason that it'll translate to the next level. It was one of the same things with Cosmi. Like, Cosmi in college had this soft outside shoulder in pass protection. So you're always like, is he going to be okay versus longer, bigger rushers? Those deficiencies are not here with Coleman in the same way. So again, there's not a ton of reps, but the reps you do see, the feel, the timing, the positioning, and the ability to sync on power are all there. So maybe this is a guy that kind of grows up and fills out that tackle role for you. And he did play left tackle, so I think it's worth considering.
He did. He played a lot of left tackle, actually. I don't have the numbers in front of me right now, but I think total snaps, he might have played more tackle than he did guard.
Oh, really?
At TCU. I'll pull it up in a second. I'll ask you this question, then I'll start furiously typing. It's really not that hard. PFF has it all done up. I just got to log in. But when you look at the strategy element here, in terms of they take Newton at 36, they're on the board at 40, and they've got options there. And at 50, I believe they still even had quite a few options, because none of the tackles really went. Like, there was such a run on tackles in the first round that all the tackles that were available in the second were available almost all the way into the third round. And so you had your Patrick Pauls, you had your Kingsley Suamatias, you had Roger Rosengarten, you had all these guys available. What do you make of them passing on all of those guys for Sandersill and Sanat, and then taking this flyer of a different kind on Coleman at 67, seeing what you've seen now of him and kind of watching him through that tackle lens?
So I think, Newton and Sandersill were definitely safer picks, right? They're definitely better football players. Their production was better in college. I think when you look at those guys, I think they get pushed up boards because offensive linemen, much like quarterback, get pushed up boards. And I was pushing them up my board because I thought, oh man, Kingsley Suamataia is a tremendous athlete, but technique is very inconsistent. The mental kind of consistency from him is very inconsistent. And you look at Patrick Paul, I think, has the potential to be something very special because of the measurables, but the hand placement, the footwork, very inconsistent. And then you look at Roger Rosengarten, who again played right tackle at UW, extremely talented from a footwork standpoint, but 33-inch arms. That's always a little bit of a concern. Would be making the transitional left, so okay, I don't love that. And then Kieran Amadiji from Yale has all of this tremendous upside, but has only played 3 games last year, coming off a quad injury, and is coming from Yale. So when you look at those guys, you're kind of like, I like the package that they're in. I like the physicality that they bring. But in terms of the production on the field, it's not always there. There's a lot of growing that needs to do. So if they brought one of those guys in, I'm like, shoot, well, good thing Lucas is here, because I think there's the development course for them is significant, right? With Brandon Coleman, it's a little bit different.
Same thing. In a different way, but thank God Lucas is here, but we got another development project, and we have no questions about the finish and the nastiness and all that kind of stuff.
That's exactly right. So when you look at that stuff, you say, okay, well, he's going to play hard. he's got honestly, in the tackle reps that I've seen, which is probably like 150, so, there's more, but probably about 150, they're good. They're consistent. You know what I mean? And that level of consistency is not always there for those other guys. So his ceiling might not be the same, might not be Patrick Paul, who's one of the biggest, most athletically imposing people I've ever seen, but his floor is much higher than Patrick Paul's, right? And so I think that's what you look at, right? If it doesn't work out, he could easily play guard. He could probably play center, right? He's a really good football player, wired the right way. And I think having that flexibility, even though it didn't initially, is nice. And now it's got to work out. We'll see what happens when they get into training camp. But I do think there is value there, and I feel better about it having watched more film of him and kind of seeing some of the stuff that again, he's got to hit. It's got to work. But the guard tackle flexibility, the maturity that he shows on film, and the consistency are things that get me excited.
So whatever it's worth. 2021, he played mostly guard. He played 19 snaps at left tackle, 432 at left guard, 26 at right guard. In 2022, he played 1,007 offensive snaps. 999 of them were at tackle, 2 at right tackle, 997 at left tackle, and only 3 at guard. That is also his highest graded season per PFF. So he graded an overall grade 2022, playing almost exclusively, 99.5%, literally. Actually, probably it's like 99.8% at tackle, graded 79.6. In 23, he split 465 reps at left tackle, 255 at left guard, and his overall grade dropped to a 57.7. So, for whatever it's worth, this one season he played at left tackle almost exclusively was his best season per PFF. So he's got way more tackle experience than guard experience overall, and it seems like that's where he's better suited.
Yeah, and I think, and again, that consistency with the pass set is very encouraging. And then I can't overstate, like, he's a physical SOB. He wants to get after you and wants to mess you up. So I'm going to bet on that. I don't want a guy that – I had a conversation with an online coach who said sometimes – I don't know, like they draft these guys who are really good in pass protection, but they can't run block, and they're out of the league. And there's no question that he can do both of those things. It just depends on where you think he's better suited at the NFL level.
All right, last but not least, and again, we'll do the late round guys and the UDFAs and some other thoughts from the draft on the late week pod. But Luke McCaffrey out of Rice, wide receiver, played quarterback at Nebraska, transferred to Rice, converts to wide receiver. Yes, his brother's Christian. Yes, his dad is Ed. And yes, it matters. Not in a nepotism kind of way, although he certainly benefits from growing up around it. But he grew up in a family that was hyper competitive, that had their dad as a Super Bowl champion as an example of the highest level. He's constantly competing with Christian, who's one of the best players in the league. And I think what's really interesting in listening to people talk about him and reading more about him and watching him play a little bit is, even though he's a converted quarterback, he is tough as nails. And this is not like let me go out here and try it because I'm a pretty good athlete thing. Like, this dude took a mentality to the wide receiver position, and he's continually gotten better. He's going to work really hard. He's got great resources, not only with what Washington is building in terms of their internal resources, but being able to go talk to Christian and his father about playing receiver in the NFL. Christian's obviously a running back, but lines up out there a lot and is considered a wide receiver caliber, like a great wide receiver caliber route runner. This is an exciting upside play who, again, comes to you with the floor of character and competitiveness and all the things that Adam Peters is obviously known about because he's been with Christian in San Francisco for a long time.
Yeah, this guy feels to me like the perfect big slot, and what I mean by that is a guy that is like your third receiver and does all the dirty work. He'll crack a safety, he can run a choice, he's going to cut defensive ends and not even blink twice about it. I think he also has some return upside in terms of the new return rules, because you're trying to run kind of gap scheme downhill runs. He'll play gunner on teams. Again, the physicality when he catches the football, the physicality when he's blocking is there. He's not like a murderer, but he's got to get in the way and work to finish. Like, there was a play, I think it was against Texas, where he kind of misses the block, circles back around, gets back in front of the guy, pushes him out of bounds, and the running back's able to cut off his butt. You know what I mean? And there's just kind of this never say die approach to his play style. And I think the thing, again, that you're betting on here is that, like you talked about, the resources, the pedigree, the way you watch him work, the way he improved, he's a guy with a tremendously high floor. And to me, just screams like Puka Nakua. Like that's what he screams. Like when you watch him, like it's that type of player. He's going to do the dirty work. He's grounded through the catch point. Like he's got enough variation and releases now to be successful at the NFL level. But I think that package is just going to continue to grow as he matures at the position. So, I think he's going to be a fine pick again. Like he's got to grow and he's got to develop. But in terms of a floor pick, like the floor is extremely high with him. I think the ceiling could be something special. I think that's exactly what you're looking for in the third round.
You talk about production too. 6 touchdowns in his first year at receiver in 2022. Got up to 13 touchdowns in 13 games. Logan, I'm not very good at math, but I think he scored once a game.
That's pretty good. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so the physicality, the blocking, the kind of that role that you. Again, we talked about Ben Sinnott and your ability to kind of say, what personnel are we in? It feels like the same thing with Luke McCaffrey. And so when you watch LA, for example, they're never in anything but 11. But Puka Nakua will go crack a linebacker for you now, right? He'll go stick his face on Roquan Smith, and they'll run an ISO with him doing that. I think Luke McCaffrey has an element of that. And again, I think he's got to get a little bit bigger for that full time. But, he's 200 pounds, get to 210, and start doing that role. But I think that mindset in terms of that big slot mindset is right there for you. And it allows you to, again, find personnel advantages with that type of toughness at that position.
And I think the positionless nature that we see the background of, Adam come from with Kyle as well, right? Like Debo, Kittle, and Juszczyk are the 3 guys in that San Francisco offense. And McCaffrey as well. I guess all 4 of those guys can kind of line up anywhere, but specifically Juszczyk, Debo, and Kittle, like they'll line up in line, they'll line up as fullbacks, like they'll move those guys around. McCaffrey and Debo are interchangeable. Like those interchangeable pieces were such a big part of what they're able to do schematically out there and create the advantage to the personnel like you're talking about. And it feels like they got to in Sinnott and McCaffrey, 2 guys to try to replicate that in whatever version Cliff wants to do. So it's going to be really fun to watch. Obviously, we will do so first in training camp or mini camps, which come up in just a couple of weeks. Rookie mini camps like 2 weeks away. Then the OTAs and all that. And then August comes and we get to see it quote unquote for real, training camp for real. And then September suddenly will be here before we know it. That's it, and that's all for this edition of Take Command. We'll talk about the final 3 draft picks and some of the UDFAs later on in the week. We can also talk about our winners and losers from the rest of the NFL with the draft, and then we're in silly season, Logan. Then I don't know what we're gonna do. We did podcasts last year around this time. We did stuff. You guys liked it. You kept listening. So we'll figure out what we did last year and we'll do it again. Just the 2024 version. In the meantime, thanks for listening. If you are new and you are just checking us out for the first time, then hit that subscribe button. We're here twice a week in your podcast feeds. For Logan, I'm Craig. We'll see you next time on Take Command. Thanks for watching this clip of Take. Now, Essig, you used to produce that show as well. Then we decided Russell was enough to handle for you. You didn't need to deal with me and Logan, too. We relieved you of that duty. That was a sadistic thing we did to you. My outros haven't gotten any shorter. I still don't know how to wrap up a podcast.
Yeah, you ramble a little bit, but
I do things. Did you switch mics? What happened there?
I might have switched mics. I'm realizing now. Yeah.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah.
Well, sometimes we can't be perfect with the production,
No. That actually reminded me though. So I'm putting the finishing touches on it, but I did while I was at the draft, like throughout the whole travel. I did a vlog, my first ever travel vlog, and I think it needs finishing touches, but I think it came out really well. But the funniest moment in the vlog is when Brian Mitchell's mic wasn't working when we were going to record our chat on Friday or Thursday from the draft, and I dropped a one-liner on B. Mitch that just left him speechless. That left him going, wow. I was proud of the line. I sent it to multiple people. They laughed really hard. And that vlog will be done by the end of the week, and you can look for the funny B. Mitch moment in the vlog. That's all I'm going to say. That's all I'm going to say right now.
I'm excited. I'll actually check it out.
I do have that very small clip pulled. So you, Matt Essick, because you are a superhero who is filling in last minute for Ant today, I will reward you with this little clip in the break. When we get back, though, Hunt Palmer of ESPN 104.5 in Baton Rouge, LSU radio network as well, will join us to talk about Jaden Daniels. It's the Hoffman Show. There we are on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app, streaming live on YouTube at the Team 980 as well. Our pleasure to bring in Hunt Palmer of 104.5 ESPN down in Baton Rouge. Talk a little bit about Jaden Daniels. Hunt, appreciate your time, man. Welcome to the show. Thank you.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure. I'm always happy to talk about Jaden Daniels. I wish he was coming back to Baton Rouge for another year, but I guess
y'all had him long enough, Hunt. Good gracious. I know he only did 2 years there, but how many years did you want the man to play college football?
Well, whenever you're in the professional ranks and y'all get a really good player, you can keep him forever. We got to ditch him out of town after 2 or 3 years.
You know what? That's a fair point. Me being selfish up here with my professional sports team that I get to cover. Y'all had a pretty good run with some folks, specifically one certain quarterback with the Saints, though. So I'm not going to let you play me too much like that. But no, with Jaden, I'm just going to leave this totally open-ended. Like, as an NFL prospect, as you watch him this year, how did you see him develop, and what do you think he can be as a pro?
He was worlds different in his last year than he was the year prior. Very similar to what Joe Burrow was. I mean, they were good players as juniors at LSU, and LSU had nice seasons. But there was a jump in that last year that was just unbelievable to watch. And you saw flashes in Jaden's first year in Baton Rouge. In Florida, they scored a touchdown in their first 6 drives. The Alabama game obviously comes to mind where he made a lot of really clutch plays late in that game. But it was more up and down. He held on to the ball way too long, frustrated a lot of LSU fans because they had Brian Thomas and Malik Neighbors and Kayshon Boutte and all those guys running down the field. And Jaden was hesitant to put the ball in the air unless they were wide open. He would just rely on his feet, and he'd run for 7 or 8 yards, but there was no big plays. And Brian Kelly even said in a press conference one time during that season, like, yeah, he has no interceptions, and that looks great on a stat sheet, but it might not be the best thing because the ball needs to come out. And he decided to work on that the summer after his junior season, and he was a different dude in his last year. The ball was coming out quickly. It was decisive. It was always accurate. It was the right decision, and you saw Malik Neighbors go nuts. Brian Thomas lead the country in touchdowns, and Jaden Daniels win the Heisman Trophy. There was no up and downs for his last year. It was almost every drive was a clinic that they put on that year. It was really a treat to watch. And some guys translate great to the NFL, some guys don't. And I don't claim to know them all, but it would be hard for me to put together a better season in terms of decision making, accuracy, big plays, using your legs, using your arm. Like, it was as good as it could be. It was very much in the Joe Burrow category down here in Baton Rouge in the Vol.
Hunt Palmer's with us. It's funny because I feel like some of the fans up here got a little carried away with the Burrow stuff. I'm like, y'all realize that Burrow threw for 60 touchdowns, right? Like, that was the most insane thing ever. But certainly there's some parallel there with the jump from the very solid, like, intriguing junior year to Heisman winning, otherworldly senior year. For Jaden, I think one of the things that's really interesting is, like, he did have those receivers as a junior and then had them again, and they had a much different production as a senior. And I feel like some people struggle to make sense of whether, like, who was elevating who there. And so from someone who had a front row seat for it all, like, those 3 players, Thomas, Neighbors, Daniels, how do they all improve from 22 to 23 that they all produced at the levels they did where they're all becoming first-round picks?
You know, it was the same cast of characters, as you mentioned, and Mike Denbrock, the offensive coordinator, was there as well. Joe Sloan, the quarterback's coach, was the same. So it wasn't as if there was some sort of presence that wasn't there the year before that. For Burrow, there was that. They brought in Joe Brady, who kind of changed the offense, and everything kind of looked different between 18 and 19. This was the same cast of characters as 2022. I think there was just a more decisive quarterback is the best way that I can say it. I mean, Jaden really frustrated a lot of LSU fans by patting the football in the pocket a ton in 2022. And like I said previously, like, he would just take off and he'd get 7 yards and it was fine. But there weren't enough chances being taken. He trusted those guys implicitly with the deep ball and just even in intermediate stuff this past season, and it was just so efficient. The ball was always accurate, and those guys are so explosive after the catch that it was just a nightmare to try to defend. So I can't point to a player or any other development outside of it was just more decisive from Jaden's perspective, and the ball came out a lot more quickly.
Yeah, no, I mean, that tracks with what you see on tape, too. That's the thing that struck me immediately when watching him and why I liked him so much is there's just like a confidence and a rhythm to everything that they did that it was clear that he had a high level of trust. And to hear how he kind of changed that from 22 to 23 is really interesting from your perspective. We also know that he kind of changed his routine. He discovered like this Oculus virtual reality stuff. How much was that on y'all's radar down there in Baton Rouge during the season that he had done all this different stuff in the offseason leading into the year?
Yeah, it got to us eventually when things started really breaking. I mean, you're talking about the Mississippi State game was in week 3, and he was sensational in that game. He and Malik Neighbors were completely unstoppable, and then it kind of continued over the next couple of weeks. Even in a loss to Ole Miss, they scored 50 points, and they went nuts in a shootout again against Missouri. And then you realize, like, this wasn't like one game where they got hot. Like, this is different. So questions started coming out, and he talked about the virtual reality stuff, and that's one of the deals in college football. There are haves and there are have-nots, and LSU is obviously a have, and the resources there are second to none with the ability to game plan and to use all the technology that's available at LSU that you may not have. Certainly, all the rest of the SEC schools you would have that, but if you potentially Arizona State may not have that. And Jaden did not have a huge class schedule because he had been in college for 5 years, and he was able to kind of become a professional in the way that he prepared, and that's very similar to the way that Joe handled things as well. I think Burrow had 3 hours that he took his last year, and it was remote, so he was in the facility all day, every day, like an NFL quarterback would be. Didn't have the necessary, like the general academic rigors that a lot of college students and student athletes would have. Jaden was in that same boat as well, and they're just able to kind of treat themselves like a professional at that point. And from his preparation into the performance on the field, it was really special.
Hunt Palmer, 104.5 ESPN in Baton Rouge, is with us here on the Hoffman Show. That coincides with the next question, which is we've heard this work ethic is legendary. And, Brian Kelly's talked about how they kind of had to change the rules because they're like, no, I guess we'll let this guy in the building more than we let anyone else in the building before. Is that like, did he always have that? Like, what do you remember from him when he got there from Arizona State? Was this just more time in the schedule, or did he like kind of grow up's not really the word I'm looking for, but I can't think of a better thing about it. Did he just mature to that level that he started working like that?
Yeah, he came in the summer, and he was late arriving, and I think just trying to get acclimated to Baton Rouge, and then he had a quarterback battle on his hands because Miles Brennan was basically the incumbent quarterback. He had been the starter in 2020 and then got hurt, and then he'd come back, and he was still around in 2022. And so, Jaden was in a quarterback battle with him, and you win that, and then all of a sudden it's kind of your team for that year. And I think that first year was just a lot being thrown at him. I think his time management in his final year was just significantly better. And he was just more comfortable, and he had the same cast of, as I mentioned, same cast of receivers, same offensive coordinator, same quarterbacks coach, and he got into a routine and a rhythm, and once he kind of figured that out, his talent level takes over, and he's the baddest dude on the field at the college level.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Hunt Palmer's with us for another minute or two here on the Hoffman Show. From an atmosphere standpoint, I guess, a bigness standpoint, one of the things that I heard some scouts say throughout the process, one of the things they liked about Daniels is that he had been at LSU and in that environment, the pressure cooker that is Louisiana State football. And that's something when you come to D.C., like being the quarterback of the Washington football franchise is a massive responsibility that comes with a lot of attention. How would you describe what it is to be the LSU quarterback? And, I don't know how much, time you've spent in other places and if you have any comparisons of what it might be like to be the quarterback here, but what kind of, atmosphere, pressure cooker, et cetera, are there any good stories you can tell about how Jaden kind of handled being the LSU quarterback when we know how much football means to everybody down there on the Bayou?
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's a huge deal. It's a massive deal, and I can't speak to it day to day how he's handling it because I'm obviously not there, but I know a lot of people that have, and he's just got the slowest heartbeat in the room, whether that's in the quarterback room, whether that's at practice, whether that's in front of 105,000 playing Alabama. And he dealt with a ton on top of being the quarterback at LSU towards the end of last year, because LSU's defense was historically atrocious last year. I mean, could not stop anyone ever. And so the offense had to go out there every time, basically knowing they had to go score a touchdown. And they had to score a touchdown on every drive in the second half to beat Arkansas last year, because LSU's defense couldn't stop a terrible Arkansas team. And then on top of that, drive to drive, knowing what you had to do, he starts fielding Heisman questions. Heisman. And his level of play never dipped for a second. The only time it did was when he got knocked out of the game by a cheap shot by Dallas Turner in the Alabama game. So in terms of all the things that go into the expectation of being the quarterback at LSU and knowing you have to carry the defense and realizing you're playing for a Heisman Trophy and the immortality that comes with that, he never changed. He was just so cool, calm, and collected. It's that Southern California nature that he's got, and it played great, and he was sensational start to finish for LSU in that last stretch.
Last thing for you, Hunt. Do you have a favorite Jayden Daniels story, whether it's one that you heard, whether it's one that you experienced yourself?
A favorite Jayden Daniels story. Well, I'll go off the field. One that not a lot of people know that happened 2 weeks ago. That comes to mind as I start to think about the 2 years. You know, this is a pretty hectic time in his life, and he's got a lot of demands on his time and where he's going to be, and a lot of uncertainty in his future. And I got a text message from a client of mine who had Jayden was asked, he and his mom were asked to come to a children's cancer hospital here in South Louisiana. Dropped everything, said, absolutely, I will be there, no questions asked. He spent 3 hours on the cancer floor of this hospital in his LSU jersey, taking pictures, signing things, being available. It never got out to the local news, and I never saw another picture of it from the people that cover LSU, and he didn't take a cent. I know that as well. So he's a great guy. He's been an incredible ambassador for LSU and a hell of a football player. And you know, we've got a lot of eyes on Cincinnati down here now on Sundays because of what Joe Burrow did and what he means to LSU. And I've got a real feeling that there will be a very similar following for Washington down here now that he's calling snaps for the Commanders.
That is a great story, Hunt. I'm really glad I asked that, and thanks for sharing that. Really appreciate it. Hunt Palmer, host 104.5 ESPN in Baton Rouge. You can follow him on Twitter at HuntPalmer88. Hunt, really appreciate the time and the perspective, man. Thanks for doing this.
Absolutely. Happy to.
That's Hunt Palmer with us here on the Hoffman Show. When we get back, react to that. And we got time for a couple more calls before 6 p.m. as well. 301-230-0980. Talking Commanders draft with you here on the Team 980. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app and streaming live on YouTube at the Team 980. Coming up, 6 p.m., winners and losers from the NFL Draft. You can get yours in at 301-230-0980. We've already talked about a couple, but did this Friday on the first round. But now that the full draft is in, take a more global look at things and go around the league a little bit with you coming up at 6 p.m. Right now, though, more thoughts on the Commanders. Again, thanks to Hunt Palmer for joining us from ESPN Radio in Baton Rouge. But take more of your calls now, 301-230-0980. Let's go to John in South Florida. John, thanks for hanging on there. You're on the Hoffman Show.
All right, thank you, sir, for taking my call.
You got it.
Listen, I love the draft, what the Commanders did. But here's one analysis I would like to see happen. You know, and I know y'all broke down Brandon Coleman, the tackle from TCU is upside. Mm-hmm. But I would like to see Adam Peters and them sign David Bakhtiari that used to be with the Green Bay Packers. Yeah. This kid is a Pro Bowl player. He's an unrestricted free agent. We can sign him to a one-year deal, see if he's proven. I wouldn't want to see us put Coleman in that situation, a rookie quarterback and a rookie left tackle. That's kind of dangerous, right? So I would like to see us sign him, right? Sign him to a one-year deal, right? Let him prove himself. We can develop Coleman. We don't have to put so much pressure on him out there to start. And I'm going to hang up and see what you think about that, Hoffman. Thanks for taking my call.
Yeah, you got it. Thanks, John. Appreciate it. John was holding for quite a long time there, but appreciate him sticking with us. I'm fine with him signing Bakhtiari. It's a name that I've brought up multiple times. He's a guy that played his entire career in Green Bay. Unfortunately, he's played 14 games the last 3 years. 12, and then 1. So he just does not have the reliability that you want necessarily. But he's got a nasty streak. He obviously was a Pro Bowl caliber player at his peak. It is really terrible now that I look up players and I'm like, God, that guy's so old. Then I realize that they're like 3 years younger than me. Oh, that hurts. But anyway, Bakhtiari is a guy who actually, no, I think Bakhtiari is only a year younger than me. I think I was mixing up numbers that I just looked up 5 seconds ago. And I felt the need to say that out loud. Anyway, point is, Bakhtiari, if you sign him, probably better than what you got in Corn Lucas. Certainly you would be willing to find out in training camp, let them compete. Of course, the more competition you bring in, the less reps you get for Coleman to develop. So that is something to think about. What I will say, though, in terms of the rookie left tackle, rookie quarterback thing is it actually doesn't matter that much at tackle. Of course, a veteran is always better than a rookie if they're equal players or close to, because the experience is going to help prevent some mistakes. But it's not like a left tackle's making a bunch of protection calls, right? The reason you go sign Tyler Biadasz as opposed to rolling with Ricky Stromberg is Stromberg doesn't have the mental file of 100 games in the NFL like Biadasz does. Biadasz can come in and call all the protections or at least help Jaden Daniels with the protections. Jaden actually did a decent amount of that stuff at LSU, so assuming he can come in and they can put some of that on his plate, like he can run it from the quarterback spot, but Biadasz can at the very least double check him, if not just take that off his plate entirely to start the year, and then they can shift as the year goes on if they so choose. With a left tackle, it's like, hey, dude, go play. And if he can play, he can play. The experience is less of a factor. Of course, you know, if you have faced a certain rusher multiple times, like that matters. But it's left tackle is just, I guess what I'm trying to say is left tackle is not this massive mental position in the way center is. Or even, and for some teams, guard is a little bit more that way. And so I'm not as concerned. If Coleman can beat out Corn Lucas, then he deserves to play there. Because if you're better than Cornelius Lucas, you're a starting NFL tackle. And if you're not, well, then you're not. Let's go to Lap. Lap, thanks for calling. Thanks for checking in. You're here on The Hoffman Show.
Hey, what's up, Craig?
What's up, Lap?
Good show as always, man. Appreciate you taking my call. Hey, man, I'm pumped up, man, with Jaden Daniels. You know, I've been, adamant about, us picking him for the longest, man. So I'm pumped up. Want to see, as a transition on the field, within the division, man. And I just think he got the most swagger, man, to compete with the NFC East, man. I don't think those other guys would have been, under pressure to compete, NFC East. And I didn't really hear anybody talk about, the divisions of those quarterbacks, and how much pressure it is, within that division. So I think Jaden is built for it, man. So I'm excited. And I like Luke McCaffrey, too. I'm a big Christian McCaffrey fan. Like you said, their father won Super Bowl. And I'm excited to see what he can do. And if he, got that chip on his shoulder and any competitiveness, like you said, man, I think he'd be exciting to really help us, out, in the future. So, man, it's a good draft. I hope we do get addressed the left tackle, but so far all the positions we have of need that we needed, we did take in the draft. So, and I know that guy that y'all keep raving about, how much time, Craig, has he had with left tackle?
With Brandon Coleman?
He didn't play that much, right?
No,
yeah,
he played way more left. He played way
college.
more tackle than he did guard. He played.
Oh, okay.
He played 1,000 snaps basically at left tackle as a junior, and like 3 at guard. And then last year it was 455 at left tackle and 200 and something at guard. So he's been mostly a left tackle.
Okay.
But
left tackle. Okay.
Yeah.
You think he's ready to play right now, or you think he might need more time?
I mean, I think based off I don't pretend to have an expertise in offensive line play. That would be the first thing I would always say. Logan, in his initial watching of him, was impressed. And Lap, appreciate the call as always, man. We actually got a couple, so I'm gonna let you run and listen off air, or listen offline. But I think the things that I think about with tackles, just on a very 10,000 foot level. One, do you have the measurements? And tackle is a position that's really hard to overcome, not having like a certain arm length, certain wingspan, and being like a certain size. And he checks those boxes. Unlike a lot of guys who wind up playing guard when they're kind of these guard tackle projections, a lot of them have the shorter arms. And it's like they're right on the line, but they were really good and were able to overcome it in college. And you want to give them a shot in the NFL to see if they could do it at the NFL level, and especially at a high level. And then typically the arm length, even if their feet are really good, et cetera, they can't overcome it. The reason that Coleman is split, and some people reject him at guard, is he's got really heavy hands, which are great for playing inside, but certainly not bad to have outside either. And he's really boxy in his build. He's just a big dude. Like, he's a basketball player, though, in terms of an athlete. Like, he grew up playing basketball, and he's got really long arms. He's like 34.5-inch arms. And so he's got the requisite, like, body type, even if he's a little boxier. Like, he's just a big box. His arms are long enough. And so because of that, he can play tackle in this league. And then from, like, that standpoint, right? Then it's like, can he actually do it? And the biggest question I would have for a tackle, and this is something where we're like Sam Cosmi was okay, and I think why he ultimately moves inside to guard is because it was just easier to take this thing off of his plate, is how do you feel, like, what's your feel for space? Do you have the ability to set in a way that you're hard to get around? And Logan was talking about this on Take Command the other day with Cosmi, because there's a lot of similarities between Cosmi and Coleman. But one thing that Cosmi had was he had this soft outside shoulder. And obviously, like, soft is a relative term, and soft is not a word that I would ever associate with Sam Cosmi's play style. But he was easier to get around on that outside shoulder. And defensive ends were able to kind of rip around the outside on him with enough regularity that it was going to be hard to become an elite tackle. It wasn't like he was letting dudes by every snap, but it's like, hey, if we just we take that away, because now there's a tackle next to you at guard, right? You're not exposed in that way, and he's so good at everything else. Well, now you're an elite guard. We've taken away your weakness, we accentuate your strengths, and you're an elite guard. And maybe Coleman winds up being that, but he's got the feel where the rush line, kind of that, like, okay, how do I keep my body in the middle, dead between the guy rushing me and the quarterback? Coleman's got a feel for that. That's really, really nice. And so that's why I think he ultimately can succeed at tackle if he can maintain that at the NFL level. It's one thing to do it in the Big 12, another thing to do it in the NFL. And I think the interesting thing about his 22 tape versus 23 tape is he battled a ton of injuries in 23, or enough injuries in 23, specifically at his ankles, which makes moving really hard. And he found a way to scrap. But when he was healthy in 22, he was really good. If he had repeated his 22 performance in 23, he's probably, I mean, I don't want to say he's definitely a first-round pick, but he's certainly a second, if not a first-rounder. Instead, he drops all the way to the third, and the Commanders get him. And if he's healthy and able to stay at one position and can get coached up a little bit, you might have a starting caliber tackle and maybe even a really good one because he is a freak athlete. His raw athletic score is extraordinarily high. He moves well in space. He's got the physical strength and power. And he's more athletic than Peter Skoronski, who was a top 10 pick last year and has a similar build but has longer arms. So the thing that Skoronski gets popped inside at guard for, even though he was a top 10 pick, you don't have to worry about that with Coleman. Obviously, the consistency and the deployment of your skill is why Skoronski's a top 10 pick and Coleman's a third rounder. So it's not saying that he's a better player, but like that's the kind of upside that we're talking about here with Brandon Coleman. When we get back, we can take more of your calls. We got a couple lined up. So I'm cool taking calls on this Tuesday. We're not going to, take calls forever on the 2024 draft, but certainly can do it for the rest of today. And I will even expand the space a little bit here. We'll take calls on the Commanders draft if you want them, or if you have a big-time winner or loser from somewhere else in the NFL. Whether it's your team, you're a Steelers fan, you're a Titans fan, you're whatever, you love your draft, you hate your draft, now's your time. Or if you got another team that you're just watching and you're putting your analyst cap on, we're just talking draft. 301-230-0980, taking your calls for the next half hour before we talk a little NBA playoffs on the way out on the Team 980. Final hour of the Hoffman Show here on the Team 980. Always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Streaming live on YouTube at the Team 980. 6:30, we'll talk a little NBA playoffs right now, though. Taking your calls, 301-230-0980. That's 301-230-0980. The Team 980 listener line. Your thoughts on the Commanders drafts or your NFL draft winners and losers. We don't often offer multiple paths to call in, but hey, we're just vibing on this Tuesday. So kind of wherever the wind takes us. Let's start off with Robert in Fort Lauderdale. Robert, thanks for calling. You are on the Hoffman Show.
Craig, how are you? It's my first time calling into your show, so this is a pleasure to do.
Oh, thank you for doing that. Much appreciated.
I have an observation regarding the draft, but I really have another question.
Okay.
My observation is very quick. I'm sensing from the tenor of the calls that are coming in that there's a large expectation of performance by the team in the upcoming year. And I think that there should be some temperance of these expectations after Game 3. If the team loses the first 3 games, then there are going to be hues and cries of fire the coach, fire the general manager, the usual things that take place here in Washington. And I hope that there will be some temperance, not only from the fans calling in, but also from you guys to remind the callers that we basically have a rebuilt team with a lot of youth. Youth will make mistakes. They're not going to come out of the box and go and appear in the NFC Championship game. I'm just hoping that there's some kind of civility, but also some kind of reasonableness in terms of the expectations that are going to be there.
Yeah, Robert, I promise I'll let you keep going in a second. I would just say, if you're coming to sports radio for a hope of civility, my friend, you've come to the wrong place. I hope that my show is perhaps a little more civil than the rest of my colleagues. They embrace some of the wildness that I don't always tolerate. I will tell you from my own personal perspective, God, I don't want to say there's no chance because who knows what could happen in this wacky, crazy NFL world. But there is almost no chance that even if they are 0-3 to start the season, that I would say that anybody deserves to be fired. Because I think that I am someone who likes to judge things based off of process, and I think the process has been very, very good so far. I understand what they're doing. I think they are executing their plan well. You know, in multiple years from now, we'll be able to evaluate it through the lens of results and see if it ultimately worked and just how well they executed it. But right now, everything they're doing makes sense. And I tend to agree with you that there are some folks that are getting a little out over their skis. I think excitement's great. I'm not telling you not to be excited if you're someone who is extremely excited. But I do think that, you know, a 6, 7, 8-win season is much more likely than a 10-win season. If it's 4 again, I'd be surprised. But I tend to agree with you that, you know, excitement, you know, needs to be channeled or is probably best channeled. I'm not going to say needs to be because I don't want to tell people what to do with their feelings, but it's best to be channeled into proper expectations.
I completely agree with you, and I'm glad you said that. Now for my question, which is unrelated to the draft. Have you heard anything or garnered any talk or any kind of discussion with respect to as to what the organization is going to do about television broadcast this year? I know that the last year the team did have contracted with before Monumental took over, when it was NBC Sports, to broadcast in like a post-game show or other types of promotional broadcast. What is the team going to do this year? Are they going to engage with the Monumental people for anything, or are they going to stick to the format they have right now on the Internet in terms of broadcasting any kind of game promotional type shows or post-game shows or anything of that nature? Have you heard of anything, or is there anything in the works that you may be aware of?
Great question, Robert. I have not heard of anything. My best guess would be that the team would probably continue in their current form. I would also guess that, and you know, if you want an alternate non-team broadcast option, that we are also going to do in some form what we did last year, where Logan and I are doing our post game, on YouTube, Take Command live stream, which, folks can't join us live. You check it out in the podcast feed the next morning. That seemed to go well for us last year. But I do think that it is pretty wild that there isn't a television postgame show. I don't know if that's ultimately what you're getting at here, but considering who the team is and the size of the market and how much the team needs or means to the city, it would seem like there's an opportunity there. My guess is the folks at Monumental would certainly be open to a conversation as they continue to expand their TV offerings. And Ted and Zach Leonsis have been very clear they don't want to air infomercials. It seems like Commanders programming would be good programming for them, but they also are focused on their team. So I honestly have no idea where they come down on that and what other options might exist, because they are Monumental is currently the only regional sports net in town.
Yes, I would understand that. And I'm coming out of Fort Lauderdale, so I get my TV, my TV on by means that I really can't talk about on the air. But it's still a welcome opportunity to be able to have some kind of live television broadcasting of the team. I mean, nothing wrong with going on the internet, nothing wrong with being able to see the Take Command broadcasts that are there. And I have listened to the podcast that you've got. You guys are great.
Thank you.
But I was just wondering if again, since Monumental has expanded, the old regime for the team has left. There's a new regime in town. Whether there's been any kind of communication between the Harris people and the Monumental people, and if there may not be any at all, then everything stays at status quo.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to see if you may have heard of anything, since I know that who was the program, the communications director, is not going to be serving in that capacity for this upcoming year, that there may have been some movement in trying to communicate something with respect to Monumental.
Yeah, no, I don't have any idea, Robert. It's a good question, and I am definitely curious in following that. Appreciate your call, Robert. It was really good on all fronts. Thank you.
Sir, I will get back to you. Thank you.
All right, thank you. The one thing I will say, and I haven't talked to, obviously I'm friends with JP and Mitch, but I haven't talked to them about this. They did do a draft special in the new studios at Monumental. So it's not, Monumental cut a lot of stuff when they switched from NBC Sports Washington to Monumental, and they kept a couple of things that were not Caps, Wizards, Mystics, gaming, Wizards, etc. related, right? They kept the junks, which is great to have our morning show simulcast on TV. Love that. I've joked with some folks over there if they would like to pick up an afternoon show. We already are set up for video, and we are happy to be on YouTube. But if they want to put us on television, I wouldn't say no. But in all seriousness, they kept the junks, and they kept JP and Mitch's podcast, Beltway Football. And those guys do a great job, and I'm glad that they've been able to keep their home and get the support that they do. But they have started doing some stuff in the new studios. And so it would not surprise me at all if there is something out of Monumental on the Commanders in the fall, but I have absolutely no inside information on that. I have not talked to anybody about it. It's not something that I frankly thought of until Robert asked, but it is certainly a pertinent and interesting question that I'm sure with the Harris group in place, they understand the power of media. I think I can say on our end, for the radio stations here, even though we don't have the broadcast rights anymore, our relationship changed instantly with the team upon sale. And frankly, it's been even better since Quinn was hired. Dan understands the media landscape in a tremendous way and has been really kind with his time and coming on a lot of our shows. And the team has been great to work with. Obviously, they helped me get Jaden there in Detroit. Where was I last week? Detroit for the draft. Even if I was there, I don't know that they would have let me do that under the previous, maybe under Rivera, and Harris, but certainly not under Snyder. There's just no vitriol and no hate. And they understand that we have jobs to do, and we're not always going to say the nicest thing about the team if we think they made a mistake. And that's just not how things used to be. And so I think the media relationships are much healthier and better under the new regime, and they understand how the media landscape actually works. And so it is something that's going to be interesting to watch. All right, we got a couple more calls, but we have some phone lines open. 301-230-0980. More thoughts on the Commanders draft or your NFL draft winners and losers on the Team 980 listener line next. the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app, streaming live on YouTube at the Team 980 as well. Taking your calls, 301-230-0980 on the Commanders draft. Just let's keep it rolling. Let's go to Kevin in Virginia. Kevin, thanks for holding. You are on the Hoffman Show.
Thanks, Jeff, for taking my call. I want to talk about the Commanders. First, a comment and a quick story. I give them a B-, and the reason why is because this best player available theory, I don't really buy into. The best player available should be applied after you fill your holes, not before you fill your holes. And there are some opportunities that were missed to fill some of those holes. For example, they should have taken the Texas wide receiver, Donnie Mitchell. That guy is a stud. And he would have taken pressure off McLaurin. He would have given Daniels, who was a great pick, another target. And he was right there at 50. And they passed on him. Giving Cooper DeJean to the Eagles is going to come back and haunt us. And the McCaffrey pick, in my opinion, is a bit of nepotism myself. I hope he plays out. But Troy Franklin was there, and he was ranked much higher at that point.
According to who?
And the final thing I would say, and I don't think they tried hard enough to go up. When you guys, or whoever asked the question of Peters, did you try to trade up? He said, we made a couple of calls, but we couldn't get any traction. Well, that doesn't sound like they tried very hard. And
what did you want them to do? Overpay?
I trust them, but I'm sorry?
Did you want them to overpay?
No.
Like what? Hold on, Kevin. Let's play this out. I call you. You're another GM. I offer you the thing that I'm willing to pay. Hey, it's Adam from the Commanders. I want to give you 36 and 100 for 24. You say no, and then I go, but I really wanna. Like, did I try hard enough now? Like, what are we talking about here? What does try mean?
Well, no, you offer another set of picks.
But what if I don't think that's good value?
Well, I think for left tackle to protect your investment in the quarterback is worth maybe overpaying a little. Did they try to get up to 16 in Seattle? What would that have cost? Maybe their 2 second rounds.
It would have cost their 2 seconds.
Is that worth a stud tackle? I think that's debatable.
I think it's debatable, but that also depends on what your evaluation of the players are. And there's no there was no sure things available at 16 that were stud left tackles.
Mims was there.
The dude who played 7 games, you're telling me is a sure thing?
The guy is a stud. I mean,
when he
went
plays
18 to the Bengals.
When he plays, he's a stud, but he hadn't played a whole lot.
My point is they're going into the next year, and they really don't have an answer at left tackle. I mean, we can hope that they do,
but
they don't have a sure thing.
Coleman is as good of a bet as any of the dudes that they could have taken in the second round. All your Patrick Pauls, all your those guys. And here's the other thing that you're missing, Kevin, is the guys that you've talked about don't fit the player profile that they want. And if you like them, that's fine. But they are trying to build a group of highly competitive, uber physical type of guys. And for instance, A.D. Mitchell is not that dude. A.D. Mitchell has a lot of tape that you're like, is he really going for it right now? Like, yes, his upside is undeniable. And I hope it works out for him. I hope he figures it out. But in year one of a rebuild, when you're trying to establish who you are as a franchise and what it means to be a Commander, A.D. Mitchell does not fit that build. And so just because he has high upside doesn't mean that they made a mistake.
Are you talking about character, leadership, those types of things?
All of those things. Physicality, consistency of play. Like, do you actually play hard every snap? Not even off the field. I'm talking on the field, competitive football character.
Right. Well, I mean, that might be a bigger issue for teams than I would acknowledge or that I recognize, because maybe when you have bad apples in the locker room, it just ruins the whole team. But I would think that you would go for the talent and somehow hold their character in line. But
It depends. It
I'm
depends
not a
on where
GM, obviously.
No, it depends on. And Kevin, like this is kind of I appreciate the call, and it's because it's illustrative of I think the disconnect between what it's like to watch a guy, even if you have a decent scouting eye of watching clips on YouTube or whatever it is that you're like, I like that guy, and I'm looking for specific things. Like we always have to remember we are not. One, when we like players or not, we are not necessarily trying to fit them within the construct of a team, either schematically or personally. Two, we also are missing a ton of information. And this is why if you listen to anything that I said over the 4 months of the draft process, I would tell you guys, like, look, they know more than we do about the people. And Adam Peters, louder than any other GM I've heard, has talked about how we are drafting people. And yes, there are certain organizations. The Eagles have done a great job over this over the years, where they are willing to take a risk on a guy like Jalen Carter, who's got questions about his character, because they think they have the pieces in place in the room to keep him in line and get the most out of him. I don't think the Commanders are at that stage yet. I think they are now building the rooms to take on a guy in 3 years like an A.D. Mitchell, where they go, we have so many good characters in this locker room that we can take on a talent with some risk. I don't think they're there yet. And that's why I love what they did this year, because I don't think they took a single guy that has any risk of failing on who they are as a person.
Great.
All right, thanks.
I don't want to minimize that. I'm just going by what I see, and again, I'm not a GM. So.
Yeah. All right. Thanks for the call, Kevin. And that's the thing. Like, there's a lot of guys that you look at talent-wise, and you're like, damn. I mean, Burton, the receiver from Alabama, I think it was Dane Brugler or Nate Tice was like, if you watch the 10 best plays from, I think it's Javon Burton, who had one of the quotes of the draft, by the way, when he got drafted by the Patriots, he goes, I'm going to make people in wheelchairs stand up. And guess what? His highlight tape, he ain't lying. His 10 best plays make him a top 10 pick. But it's about who you are, snap in and snap out. And if you look at a guy like Luke McCaffrey, right? The Commanders were looking, and I think Ben Sinnott is the same way, right? Are there other receivers and other tight ends that were ranked higher on the consensus draft boards? Yeah, absolutely. And depending on what you were looking at, those guys might have been ranked higher for a reason. If you wanted a playmaking, like hybrid receiver tight end type, then Jared Wiley, who the Chiefs took out of TCU, was your guy. 100% worth taking more over Ben Sinnott. But if you want the next Kyle Juszczyk, you want a flexible H-back tight end, move piece that blocks his face off, can block in line, can help in pass protection, can help in the run game. You want all of that? Ben Sinnott is a way better pick than Jared Wiley. Jared Wiley doesn't block. That's not his game. Ben Sinnott, that dude blocks. That dude's a hockey player. Like, literally was a hockey player. Same thing for Luke McCaffrey. You want a big slot who's physical, who will go, and he might not succeed all the time, but he's going to go try to crack a defensive end. Troy Franklin's not your guy. Luke McCaffrey's your guy. And when you add in the character, the willingness to do the dirty work, the consistency play in and play out. I mean, I saw my guy Jamal from Trapper Dive Pod. He was starting to break down some Luke McCaffrey tape, and he's like, this dude knows one speed on routes, which is not a compliment, right? You actually want to be able to tempo routes, and that's something that as McCaffrey becomes more experienced. He's just 2 years removed from playing quarterback. But you get more years at wide receiver, and you learn how to throttle up, throttle down your routes, all that kind of stuff, right? But Maul was like, this dude runs at 10 all the time. Like, set hut, pew, he's off. He'll learn to play with more nuance, but as a prospect, I love the intensity that he plays with. And that, to me, is I keep coming back to these three things with the through line of all the Commanders' prospects. One, they are physical, and they finish, right? That is physical/finish is one. Two, they play with consistent, intense effort, right? They are consistently going for it. They will just go all out. They will strain that little bit extra. They're not going to take a snap off. You can rely on them, even if they don't succeed, to try their best. And then the third part of that, or the third thing that I really, really like, and why, as much as those feel like limiting factors in some way, is all of these players are on an upward trajectory. Or almost all of them. Coleman battled injuries last year, so his trajectory is a little bit different. But he's got the high upside athletic potential. You know, as you may have seen by now, the Commanders had the highest average raw athletic score of any team of their prospect. You take everyone drafted by every team, average their athletic scores together. The Commanders rate the highest, right? And you look at guys like McCaffrey, former quarterback, played a receiver for 2 years, his best football as a receiver is ahead of him. He's only getting better. And the work ethic and all that kind of stuff plays into the ability to do that. Jaden Daniels, ultimate example, is the second pick. From what he was at Arizona State through what he was at LSU to that senior year, his arrow's pointing up, despite the fact that he's already 23 years old. The ability to get guys on the upswing, that you're going to get their best football out of them as pros, is how you steal guys in the draft. George Kittle's a way better San Francisco 49er than he was Iowa Hawkeye. Like, that's the point. And that's why I absolutely love what they did. 301-230-0980. We got Pete's on the line. We got a couple of open lines. Pete, hang tight for me. We'll get to you after the break and see who fills in the rest of those phone lines. We'll take more of your calls to round out the show here. It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980 and always live on the free Odyssey app. Phone lines are wide open if you want to get in. 301-230-0980 is the number to do so. We have a ton of stuff for Real Things today. Very excited for the final segment of the show. So we will get to Real Things, Real People Said, into Real Microphones coming up at 6:45 prompt. Time for phone calls now, though, if you got them. 301-230-0980. In the meantime, some winners, and I actually like the way that Mina Kimes posited this on her podcast. She said, because I think that calling teams losers at this point in the draft is just really hard. But there's teams that, like, I feel like the Commanders, I'm like, yep, I see the plan. I understand the plan. The plan was well executed. They were consistent with what they wanted to do. And they really did a solid job of understanding where they are in their franchise trajectory with, being year one of a rebuild and nailing the type of foundational pieces that they need to build around moving forward. I think they did a really good job with that. There's other teams, for instance, here's a team that makes you go, The Miami Dolphins, right? I don't dislike their draft, but I understand why people do. I understand the questions, and the questions are very large. Obviously, this is a team that came into this draft without a third-round pick after the tampering investigation took one of their picks away. But they took massive swings, and it feels like for a team that is trying to compete for a championship this season, that shoring up some things would have been the better play. But they're taking swings. Chop Robinson is maybe the biggest swing in the draft. Robinson could totally bust out. He is not a great run player. Of course, the edge out of Penn State wasn't a great run player at Penn State. And despite his pass rush win rate and his physical measurables being extraordinarily high, it didn't result in a ton of sacks. I think he had like 6 career sacks at Penn State, 4 last year. Like that doesn't scream first-round pick. But if they can coach him up and be like, hey, dude, if you want to be on the field, like you got to set a hard edge. We're going to have you use some of your speed in different ways. Obviously, they played a 3-4 down there in Miami a good bit, so they can stand him up and maybe use him a little bit differently than perhaps he was at Penn State. Like that's a big swing. In the second round, they take Patrick Paul, who is maybe the biggest swing at offensive line, not named Demarius Mims in this draft. Monster athlete, monstrously large human being. People that big shouldn't move that fast. Shouldn't have the movement skills that he has. But he's got to put it together and block at a level and play with the consistency that he just didn't at the University of Houston. And that was at Houston. Like, it wasn't like he did that in the SEC and succeeded at a decent level. Like, no, he did it at Houston. So they then, they double up on edge. They take Mo Kamara out of Colorado State. They take a running back in the 4th round, and they have A-Chain already. They took last year and was a revelation. Like, are they doubling up too much at certain positions? Are they investing where they need to? They lost some DBs, and they only take one. They take a Patrick McMorris out of Cal in the 6th round. So just a really interesting draft. But if they hit on Robinson and they hit on Paul, and Wright turns out to be like this other speedster for them, okay, it's not an L, but I see why people have them on their L list. The Dallas Cowboys, I would say questions, but I also love a lot of what they did. Maybe they didn't get the best value for some of these guys, but their first 1, 2, 3, 4 picks are guys that I was kind of hoping the Commanders would be potentially interested in. Cooper Beebe, maybe not as much. Like he's got an interesting set of traits at 6'3", 267. Click on the wrong guy. Cooper Beebe, that's right. 6'3", 322. That's a little bit more. I like it. But a guy that can come in as a guard and potentially start right away, and he's got really good upside in terms of his intellectual abilities. Like, that's an interesting guard prospect that can be part of a smart O-line down there in Dallas as they look to replace Tyler Biotish. And he's a guy that like called some signals as a guard in college. Liafau, the linebacker they took, is a really interesting project. Ran really well. He's got great length. Like, he's a guy that if the Commanders had drafted him into understudy Bobby Wagner, like, I would have been psyched about. And then Tyler Guyton and Marshawn Nealon were certainly guys that we talked about for the Commanders in the first and second rounds if they traded back in, or obviously if either of them fell. Nealon is pass rush out of Western Michigan, who's like got real pass rush juice. And if you can translate it from Western Michigan up to the NFL, like, the Cowboys might have, gotten an edge that can at least be as good as like a Dorrance Armstrong, who they just lost, obviously. And we'll see if he's got the upside beyond that. So I look at some of the teams, again, Atlanta's in their own category. Atlanta just committed, to me, an unforgivable sin of team building where they wasted their best asset. Because I was talking about this with a caller earlier, if you missed it. The whole reason you draft a young quarterback, I mean, obviously you want him to be good for a long time, but the benefit of having a young quarterback is you have so much less money invested in the quarterback room that you can surround that guy with really great players and overspend at other positions. The Falcons can't do that with Michael Penix because they paid Kirk Cousins. So if they wanted to draft Michael Penix, just draft Michael Penix and then use the $100 million over the next couple of years to go and buy pieces or keep your pieces instead of losing them when Drake London and Bijan Robinson and all those guys are up. Pay them because you're not paying Penix. Instead, and if you're going to pay a quarterback like Cousins, okay, that's fine. I understand he's got injury risk, but if you're worried about it, then don't sign him. But if you're going to pay Cousins, you need to hit on weapons, whether it's offensively or defensively, or pieces to support to help win a championship. You can't do both. It's too hard. And that's why the Falcons, to me, loser. Everyone else, I'm like, Las Vegas Raiders. I have questions. But I don't dislike what they did. Like, I look at Brock Bowers as one of the most interesting players in this draft and kind of the test of a theory, right? The best player available theory exists because it's just worth it in the long run to take the best guy, because the NFL rarely works out in a way where your plans work out. We're going to take this guy. Like we all did this all draft season. I'm going to try to be better about it next draft season. I'm going to try to remember this if we're doing this again next year, right? They got to take this position here, and it's one thing we have the second pick. Okay, quarterback at second, got it. But then they need an offensive tackle at 36 and an edge at 40. And it's like, what happens if all the OTs are gone by then and the best player on your board's a wide receiver? Well, no, you take the wide receiver or the corner or the whatever. Or if there's a bunch of guys that you like that you can trade back 7 spots and still get one of them because you got them all rated equally and there's none of them that are in a position that you were like dying to fill, then you trade back. That's exactly what the Commanders did. I bet you that their grade on Sanders still wasn't that different than their grade on DeJean. So they traded back. And they got Sanders still and Sinnott for the price of DeJean. And DeJean's a guy that might have not fit their profile. Whether it's competitiveness questions, I don't know. I don't feel like I heard any of that stuff with DeJean. But maybe they just look at DeJean and Quan Martin and they're like, it's the same dude. We don't need 2 of them. And if he was your best player available by a mile, you just do it. And that's kind of what the Raiders did in the first round, right? They took a first-round tight end last year, or a high tight end last year, Michael Mayer out of Notre Dame. And they just look at Brock Bowers and they're like, that dude's the best player on our board. So let's take him. We'll figure out how to use all these guys. Oh, we have a ton of weapons. Okay, cool. I don't hate that pick. Obviously later in the draft, there's folks that don't love what they did later in the draft. Jackson Powers Johnson, great tape, some character stuff with him that apparently is floating in the out there. Delmar Glaze, project tackle out of Maryland. Does he play left? Does he play right? Does he wind up inside? Like, these are always the questions with tackles that are not, first-round guys. But ultimately, I look at a lot of people, questioning what the Raiders did, and I'm like, yeah, I get it. I totally get it. I get taking Bowers there, even though it doesn't scream need, because he screams best player available. And I think in the draft, you just have to, you just have to like live with that. You just have to say like, oh, we're going to stack good football players and eventually figure out, who sticks and who stays, and, create versatility within your roster and figure out how to get your best guys on the field. It's Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. When we get back, we will hit a mega version of Real Things Real People Said into real microphones. Tomorrow on the show, it's a Wednesday. I think that means Linnell will be in here, so I'll chat with him. Maybe we're doing Thursdays with him now. I don't know what we're doing anymore. I'm all messed up now that we're sitting here on Tuesday post draft. There's no more countdown. I'm just like, what do we do for the next months? Rookie minicamp's a couple weeks away. Obviously, there's another draft to look forward to. I think that's also worth pointing out. The NBA draft, the draft lottery is on Mother's Day. The Wizards could wind up with the number one pick, so there'll definitely be some stuff to talk about there. Over Wizards coaching search that we'll start to dive into over the next couple of days. We wound up not talking NBA playoffs today. We'll definitely dive into that tomorrow as well. So we'll keep talking draft, keep answering questions, keep chatting with you guys about what we see from the Commanders moving forward here on the Team 980. But for right now, we're going to wrap up today's show with a very long edition of Real Things Real People Said in Real Microphones, because we have a lot of stuff that's really great sound.
Real things.
We're not going to be
So this year, real people
5-11, not very good.
set into real microphones.
You know, the culture is actually damn good.
All right. Let's actually start with one that we didn't get to yesterday, which is after Game 3 of the Timberwolves and Suns series, which, of course, now is over. Anthony Edwards was on with Scott Van Pelt on SportsCenter and was hilarious.
Mentality and how it's evolving, Anthony.
I just want to kill everything in front of me, man. That's the main thing. Pretty much. That's all it is to it.
Anthony Edwards is one of those people I think that is unintentionally funny. He's here to hoop, and that's about it.
How would you describe your mentality and how it's evolving, Anthony?
I just want to kill everything in front of me, man. That's the main thing. Pretty much. That's all it is to it.
Pretty much. All right. Summation. Check. Coming up, media days around the WNBA. By the way, I will say this real quick. The Mystics were incredible. I had 8 interviews yesterday and 8 bangers. 8 tremendous conversations. Let's see if I can remember them all off the top of my head. Eric Tebow obviously joined us, the head coach, but we had Aaliyah Edwards, who was great again for the second time in 10 days. Shakira Austin was just phenomenal, which is not surprising because Kira's a delight, but she was really great. Ariel Atkins was great. Carly Samuelson and I chatted about all kinds of stuff, from WNBA expansion to our favorite spots in London to her journey to the Mystics. Stephanie Dolson, Maisha Hines-Allen was delightful, really funny about her experience trying to host a podcast and succeeding. She did one season of a podcast and had her takeaways from being a media member for a little bit. That was great. Let's see, that was 5. Did Ariel? Anyway, I'm not going to waste any more time trying to remember everybody. They were all really good. And you can check them all out on my YouTube page, @CraigHoffman. They'll release publicly over the next week leading up to the Mystics preseason opener, and then ultimately their opener is on May 14th. And we'll play some bites and real things and such as we release them. But if you want instant access, we have an instant access membership on my YouTube page, and they are all up right there right now. It's like $1.99 a month. You can do that if you want to get exclusive stuff. So that's on YouTube right now, and the rest of them will come out over the next couple of days. But Aaliyah Boston was talking about becoming stronger during this offseason at the Indiana Fever's Media Day, which led to this pretty hilarious exchange.
Coach mentioned she was impressed with how much you got stronger this offseason, even with all of your...
I'll tell you how much I deadlift, but I don't want people to be like, dang, she was so off. So I'll whisper it, guys. I'll whisper it. Just know we're up there.
She then seriously answered the question, but then was like, I'll tell you guys after this, but don't let me see that number anywhere. And much to my chagrin, as a fitness nerd who wants to know how much Aaliyah Boston deadlifts, all them reporters kept their mouths shut. What good are you doing? I need that number to leak out, and I need it to leak out yesterday. I want to know how much Aaliyah Boston deadlifts, because I'm guessing it's a lot. If you told me that Aaliyah Boston, as strong as she is, deadlifted 400 pounds, I would not be surprised at all. That's all I'm saying. Funny drafts. Actually, Metal Chris is here. By the way, salute to you, sir. Thank you for coming in today. Filling in for Ann and relieving Essig on last minute as Ann is having to deal with some family stuff. But do you want to end on an inspirational note or a funny note? Because I'm going to play both bites. It's just a matter of which one I play first.
I just go funny last.
Funny last? Okay. Jay Gruden on Terry McLaurin last. But this was really great from Brian Callahan at his introductory press conference a couple weeks ago. Quoted Liverpool coach, legendary coach, Jurgen Klopp. And that then got back to Klopp, courtesy of the folks at NBC. And then Klopp recorded some stuff, which they then played for Callahan.
There's a quote from Jurgen Klopp. I didn't want to just rip it off and present it as my own, but he had said it at one point. When you agree on a common idea and work towards it together, you can create something very special.
What are your initial reactions to that?
Oh, I said a lot of things over the years.
That's great. Yeah, to have him actually watch something I said is just a pretty cool moment for me. I'm not going to lie to you.
This is Brian's first head coach role. Do you have any advice for him making that step up?
To train.
He is right about that.
That classic German humor.
Next world-class coaches in American football or in football, they're already out there. So, and he might be one of them. Why not? Seems to be a nice guy, which I think is a really important part of it as well, because you lead a team of people, and if they hate you every day, that can work in the short term, will never work in the long term. Being a good person is quite helpful as well. It's all about results. It's all immediate results. One year, the best manager in the world. Next year, everybody thinks somebody suck your football brain off, and it's just like, oh, he's not that good anymore, stuff like this. The more together you are with the group of players, with the staff and the supporters, the more likely it is you will get through these periods without any scars.
That's awesome. That's a really cool thing to hear him kind of echo all the things that I took from him from just reading a book about him and reading some articles and watching some interviews. That's pretty cool, man. He's a legend. Can I get a copy of that?
Of course.
Okay.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah.
Cool.
Oh,
pretty remarkable, to be honest.
I always think it's really cool to see who people at the top of their profession see as are the people that they look up to. And Jurgen Klopp is certainly, I think, someone that a lot of coaches around the world look up to. Brian Callahan, certainly on that list. Last but not least, on the other end of the spectrum, during the draft, Jay Gruden on Underdog Fantasy Network with Colt McCoy is the second voice you'll hear here, talking about when they drafted Terry McLaurin.
Yeah, I wanted Terry in the first, but yeah, Terry.
You would have been
Terry
right.
fell, and we were very lucky that Terry fell because we needed another fast receiver. He's a great person, a great leader, 2-year captain of Ohio State, so we jumped on that one.
I remember Terry came in and everybody was like, "Oh, he's going to be the best special teams player the Redskins have
That's what he
ever
did at
had,"
Ohio State.
right? And everybody was just like, special teams. And the dude didn't practice the last 2 weeks of training camp because he was our number one, at receiver. Jay was like, "Don't let him practice. He's our guy. Like, just trust me." And sure enough, he becomes Terry McLaurin, and great.
I wouldn't play him in a preseason game. Remember that? I wouldn't let him play in a preseason game.
I remember because I was there. I was on the beat, and I just remember being like, I think the 17 kid's really good. Like, I know I've seen and I'm coming off the Josh Doctson disaster and all that kind of stuff. And you're like, I don't know, I really liked him. He seemed to be great in training camp. We'll see in the regular season, but I'm pretty sure this guy's the real deal. Comes out against the Eagles, first quarter, gets deep, scores a touchdown. And you're like, okay, eyes did not deceive me. And here we are, all these years later. Terry is still Terry. Jay was right on that one. Too bad he wasn't right on more stuff. That's it, and that's all for the show today. We'll see you tomorrow on The Hoffman Show.